Is this a part of the circular flow model?
Yeah, so this is what you're going to be drawing. What I draw on the board, you're going to be drawing on that circular flow model, okay? So we're going to open over here, and these represent firms. Right? Those are the firms. Right, raise your hand if you are a firm. You're on this side. Remember, you're trying to buy resources, you're trying to sell goods and services. So that's one part of our model. Okay? On this other side are, is this on the screen too? Households. Right? And we're going to talk about the factor market. Down here. Actually, I'll do this in a different color. So we've got our two players, right? This is kind of how we set it up on the in our four corners of the classroom, right? So we've got our factor market up here. I'm short. We've got our product market, just like we had the four spots here. Oh, I remember I was going to do a different color for that one. Oh, what a pain. Where's our markers? All right, so the factor market. Do you remember what's exchanged in the factor market? What did we exchange in the factor market?
Resources.
Resources, yeah. So who wanted the resources?
The firms.
The firms, right? So we're gonna do, let's just do a bunch of people. All right, but this will be our factor market, I guess. Doesn't matter. So in the factor market, firms, households supply labor. Households go to the factor market. Households supply or give resources. Right? LLC, land, labor, and capital. Right? They give those resources. Sorry if I'm in the way here. In the factor market, we exchange resources for what? For money, right? And even like I said, there's wages, but households, if we think of as households as not, they can also rent your factory to you, things like that. You can come up, Jarrell, if you want to.
You think you can move that audience?
Oh, for sure. Actually, I can't because I've got to have them see this. I'm so sorry. You can move. I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. All right. And put it this way. Firms demand or want resources. I use these terms supply and demand because we're going to start talking about supply and demand anyway, pretty soon. And that's a big econ thing. Supply means you give something, right? I am supplying you with this information, right? I'm giving it to you. All right. When I want something, you can say I demand it. I know that sounds crazy, but what's the demand for something, right? So here in the factor market, we've got resources. Households give the resources. They supply them, but they don't do it for free, right? What happens in this circular flow over here? Now the firms, they give or supply wages. Wages, we might say rent. What other things? Okay, etc. I'm just gonna put money, okay? Firms. I'm really not such a sloppy writer. I think it's that. Okay. And in turn, households demand or want money. Wages, rent, etc. Money. Here, make this arrow a little bit better. There. So this is kind of my bad circle, but this is one circle, okay? So in the factor market, if you remember, we got together, the firms and the households. The firms needed resources to get their business running. They demanded resources, they wanted resources. And where did they get them? From the households, right? And in turn, so the households give the resources to the firms. The firms supply or give money to the households. Money in the form of wages or rent for the factory or things like that. Okay? So remember in the factor market, what's being exchanged? Money for resources. Money for resources. Okay? So the households supply the resources, or let's say this, the firms demand the resources and the households supply the resources. The households demand money for those resources and the firms supply that money. Kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
I think it helps when we, even though that was silly acting that out, but you remember how you have to do that, right? You're not giving away stuff for free. Everyone wants to get the most for their money. Right? Remember, we have unlimited wants and needs, right? Limited resources. Okay? Now I'm going to go to the product market. And that's another exchange. So do you remember what do we exchange in the product market? Money for what? What was written on those gold things?
Services.
Goods and services. You're excellent. Okay. So, okay. Households demand or want goods and services. And who supplies that? Here, we get this out of here. We don't need this thing. And the firms supply the goods and services. Right? Think of supply as giving, okay? Okay. Households supply money for the goods and services. They pay for them. Hi,
Hello,
how you doing?
I'm good, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do you
You-
guys have, do you guys teach together next hour?
Yes,
Okay, I'll come.
in the other classroom,
Oh, not here.
not
Okay.
here.
All right.
But I'll be here until I move over there. If you need something, you need,
No,
you
I
use
just,
this room?
right before this class is over, I'll come back.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
All right. And you can say this, firms demand, or they want money for goods and services. I wish this was like neater and fancier. So this flow in the product market, so there's a flow down here with the black marker, that's the factor market, right? The purple marker is the product market flow. Now my flow is kind of a squishy thing, right? But in the product market, households demand or they want goods and services. And the firms will supply those goods and services. But the firms demand or want money for them. And the households they'll supply the money. That's a little dollar sign. Will supply money for goods and services. They pay for them. Right? And you could see what happens. Hey, if you're raising your price too much, people aren't going to buy them. Right? If you charge too little and you don't make that much money, how are you going to get your resources down here in the factor market? Right? Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
Yeah.
Do you guys understand this one?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. All right. Now I'm going to throw something in this. Okay. Our sweet Maggie. Maggie's going to be pink. Maggie. Worker from Mexico. A change in the flow affects a change everywhere, right? So in this, let's put this. She is supplying resources. Supplying resources. Job. Okay. And the firm pays wage. They got their own little flow going over here. However, Maggie's not part of this big flow. Does that make sense? This goes nowhere. Yeah, Maggie's over here in Mexico and she's like, yeah, I'll work for less. Not I'll work for less. Basically, the firms are like, we can pay you less because you're desperate for a job. It's kind of taking advantage, quite honestly. Okay, so yeah, we can pay you a lower wage. I'll put lower wage. Okay, and she supplies those resources, but she's not part of this big flow here. She's not one of the US households. Does that make sense? And with the money you're paying Maggie, chances are she can't afford to buy much with it. Say we were producing shoes. Probably she couldn't afford to buy those shoes. Now you can say, okay, we can ship products to Mexico, wear shoes, they could buy them there, everything else. But chances are she can't afford it. So that money in the factor market is coming, diverting over here, and it doesn't get put back into the product market. And that's kind of weird, I know. But here's a household, let's say, that gets to exchange money for resources over here, but they don't get to take part in this one over here. Because all these kind of go together, right? But in turn, they can sell those shoes more cheaply and maybe make more money up here. So that's kind of the payoff or the trade-off. Remember, we had, sorry, that's what I'm looking for is trade-off. That's the kind of trade-off that they're going for. Okay, so what happens if the workers go on strike and they want more money, right? Right? Firms have to give them more money, right? We're going on strike, we're not going to work, so they've got to give them more money, right? However, remember that exchange of money for goods and services? That means they have less, the firms have less money, right? They're paying more out. Where are they going to get more money? Right? They might increase the cost of their shoes. Usually that's what ends up to be what happens. The CEO doesn't say, guess I'll take a pay cut too. It will more get passed on in the product market. Because believe it or not, these two markets are interrelated. Okay, we saw that with that demonstration here. Okay, you get paid, your consumers get paid their wages. With those wages, they go to the product market and buy the goods and services they need. If they don't get paid enough, they can't buy all the things that they need, right? The firms want those resources and they're buying up those resources. If the remember, and then they exchange those resources into goods and services. If I don't have enough resources, I can't make as many goods and services, and then I can't sell as many in the product market. Does that make a little bit of sense? And if you're confused, I get it. This takes a little bit of time to go through. It is kind of confusing. I understand how it works, but I get confused drawing it on the board and trying to translate what I'm thinking. This is a big one, and we'll review it again too, I promise. Okay, but these do intertwine, just like the factor market and the product market kind of intertwine a little bit, like we saw here with that demo. You got the money. What can you buy with that money? Poor Ari, not to pick on Ari, her cost too high. So she ended up with some goods and services. She really wanted money for those goods and services. So now it's going to happen. Okay. So let's see. What time do we have? I don't know why I always forget the time. 25, 95. Okay. Can I add something to this model? All right. Now, okay. This is supposed to be the capital. I don't know. That's a bad window. All right, we got to add the government. Maybe I'll lower this stuff a little bit too. Okay. All right. The government gets taxes from people, right? So the government demands taxes from both businesses and households, right? The government demands taxes, households and businesses supply taxes. What does the government give in exchange for the taxes? Do you know what our tax dollars go for? Public schools, post office, libraries, roads, military protection, all those things. So the government supplies that in exchange. Parks, roads. Okay. Schools, military. So basically, for people at home, I'm like writing a bunch of different things on there, but the government gives that to both households and firms. The military benefits both households and firms, right? Post offices, schools, you could say, parks, maybe in some ways, right? But really the big things like that. In exchange, so they're part of our circular flow too. In exchange for taxes, the government gives services. Right? I don't have some that are the same and different over here, but it's interchangeable. We know government services, right? Right? Maggie, sweet Maggie, our overseas worker, is not a part of this flow either. Right? She's not a part of that, our big United States circular flow model here. She doesn't pay taxes to the United States, and she doesn't get the services from the United States. So when I say flow or circular flow, it's a circle, and basically it's an exchange. I give you something, you give me something. I demand this from you, you supply it. You demand this from me, and I supply it back. Now it looks like a whole lot of gibberish on this board, right? Hopefully yours looks better than mine. Basically, though, there's a supply and there's a demand and a supply in every single circle, and there's an exchange. Okay. So on the back, I would draw it so you understand it, because part of your thing, remember, now for Charlie Jones, when you decide what kind of shoe you're going to decide to make, who's your target market, and how you're going to produce them. And again, there's no right or every answer is right as long as you know how to back it up, right? So you can say, I'm going to use overseas workers and I'm going to produce this kind of shoe for this kind of target market, make tons of money. That's fine, but I want you to include that in your circular flow, okay? There's no, I'm not going to say that's wrong, you can't do that. No, but you have, this is it. You've got the freedom to choose whatever you want, but why did you choose it? And how does it affect this? Okay, we'll practice this. We'll have a work day at home for this, work day in class for this too. Don't worry. So on the back, there's those questions on the second page of your circular flow thing. What do firms get or demand in the factor market? What do firms get in the factor market? Resources, right? We know land, labor, capital, LLC, land, labor, capital, right? And again, what do they supply? What do they give? What do they supply? And what do firms supply in the factor market? What are they giving? Money in the form of wages, rent, right? What do households get or demand in the factor market? Money. And what do they supply?
Resources.
Exactly. Okay. So the same thing. What do firms get or demand in the product market? And then I want you to add the government part too. What does government get or demand from households and firms? And then what do they give or supply? And all those government services, all those, the fire department, heaven forbid your factory goes on fire or your house catches a fire. The government pays for the fire department for you too. So those are all those different services too. It's on here too. Fire department, libraries. Like I said, you understand that they supply all those things to both groups. Okay, so put that on the back here. when we have a test, I might have you label the circular flow diagram. Okay, I might have questions like this for you on that. We'll have time to study for it. It's not for another week or so, not for another 2 weeks. I'll give you a fair warning. Okay, look it over. Think back to how we did that physical example, how we tried things out and how that worked. And that'll help you understand this too. This might be a lot to take in. I know, you're also super smarties. Okay, I'm done. That's all I have for today. Anyone have any questions? Don't be shy. All right, I'll keep this up for a little bit.
Do you have any colored pencils I can borrow?
Colored pencils, yeah, I do. Indeed, I do. Are you in anatomy?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's for English. I printed something and it didn't come out with colors.
Okay, let me see. I know we have some somewhere.
English project? I thought it was due today.
What hour do you have?
Next time?
Are crayons okay?
Yeah, anything works.
I don't know where our colored pencils, there's markers underneath it, but there's crayons in there.
Awesome, thank you.
And you can take it with you if you want to.
No, I have it next hour, so I just have to.
Okay. All right, so we'll start cleaning up at 25 after. Again, don't be shy if you have questions. If you find you go home and you're totally confused by this, come and see me during community time or flex time, okay? People at home, again, this might have been easier for you if you were here. I understand that. I will see you next week and we can go over this again in person if you want to. Okay, hopefully you drew your diagram. I'll just keep this up here, but you're done for the day if you want to exit the Zoom, okay?
Thank you.
Sure,
Thank you.
you're welcome.